Hey guys, David Vose here. Well, it was a cold one last night. It's still no snow, but it's cold. See some clouds. Don't see any real rain or snow or weather in sight. Fires are still going over in Los Angeles, and I guess the worst of it's still to come. It's a crazy thing. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, man, oh man. What do I want to talk to you today about? You know, what's been on my mind in the last all morning is something that crosses my mind quite a bit. Something that maybe you'll understand what I'm saying. Some of you will be able to relate to what I'm saying, and some of you may not. But there are thoughts that we have in the moments where we're alone or pondering or praying that seem to make things make a little more sense or gives us a kind of a little revelation. And then we might go a day or two and forget all about that. And we may have these little lights, flashes, revelations often. But for some reason, they are not before us all the time. They're not in our minds all the time. What's going over and over in our minds is the program that they have running in the background. For most people, I would say that I have never had that program running in my mind in the background as much as probably most people. I don't know. I'm just imagining, because I do seem to remember my entire life knowing full well that we were living in a delusion, that everything was a delusion. I mean, even when I was a little child, being a Jehovah's Witness, they taught us that. We were taught from the time we were born that we were living in Satan's world and everything was of the devil. So I already knew that I was taught that way. I was trained that way. I'd go to school and I questioned everything. I was suspicious of the teachers. They were trying to get me to salute the flag. Now, for most people, they were Christians even. You know, most people in my class were Christians. Growing up, I lived in a little in California when I started going to school at 6, but then we moved to Wyoming and Idaho, a lot of Mormons. So I grew up going to school with Mormons, although I never went past the 6th grade, but so they were Christians. And they were like saluting the flag and doing all the things in Christmas and everything that everybody else did. And I remember when I was in Wyoming one time in 4th grade, I remember going into this class. It was the first time I'd been there. And I was required as a Jehovah's Witness, to immediately go tell the teacher that I don't salute the flag, that I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I don't celebrate holidays, And I think I told her that. And she was an older woman, and I really liked her. A really nice lady. I'm sure she was Mormon because we were living in a Mormon territory. And I think she was a little bit surprised, or what was the word I'm looking for? She's a little bit proud of me. I think it made her stop and think. And the other kids in class, because they were all religious people. Mormons go to church every week and they're indoctrinated and taught their ways, which they believe is American values and freedom. They believe it's, the truth that they're learning about their divine heavenly Father, that is love, that we're all here in the world to learn, and we're going to go back to our heavenly Father. So they had these beliefs. And they also knew what it felt like to be different, because they were Mormons, and if you go somewhere else that's not in a Mormon territory, they would look at you like some kind of a cult. So I think when they looked at me, they thought, they were a little enamored, like, well, there's another cult like us. And he was clean cut, and they go from door to door like we do. And they were looking at me like, we thought we were the only ones that were different and were the truth and were persecuted. And we stood up for values that are correct. And here these Jehovah's Witnesses are going from door to door, and they've got their own views. Like, what are their views? Like, who are these people? You know, like, how could they're like mimicking us. They were like little me's. I think it's kind of like when you don't know how other people feel about you, and you're in your bubble and they're looking at you, and you're getting all the attention, and people are pointing fingers, and then all of a sudden you find yourself staring at on the other side, looking at someone else and thinking they're different. And in their minds and the teacher's mind, I think it shocked them for a second to like, wait a minute, there's someone who is different, doesn't believe like the other people in the world, and has to be kind of persecuted and shunned. But I'll never forget that woman, because she treated me with respect. And I remember that year they had, we all had to do some craft or something, or I don't know if it was like draw something or paint something or do some kind of art. And then we were going to turn it in. It was going to be voted on, and we'd see who's the best. And remember, we're in 4th grade, and so it went to the county fair or something. Remember, they're all Mormons. And they gave us these little, I think we had to go up to the table, and there were some pieces of all kinds of weird pieces and paper, and we had to take whatever it was there and do something with it and turn it into some kind of art, I believe. And so I saw there were some little blocks. I think most of them were like little round, almost like a broom handle was cut into little pieces, and other little blocks and pieces of wood. And I took those and some glue, and I glued them together into this weird little, house or something. And I didn't know what to do with it, so I said, Joshua's temple. Now, I was in 4th grade, and I was pretty familiar with the Bible. I knew that Joshua didn't have a temple. I mean, the Bible doesn't talk about Joshua's temple. But I just made it up just for fun. I don't know why I even did that. And I don't think I knew at the time that Mormons believe in building temples. And they believe that there were many temples, and they're still building temples today, and they got many, many temples. So I didn't really know that, and it came back and I got first prize. Well, I think it was because they were proud of me, because I was a young man standing up for what I believed. They were trying to instill that into their children, and I was a newcomer, and here I was. They probably didn't know exactly what I believed either, or what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. But when they saw me making this little art, and I didn't just do something, worldly, but I created some art that had reference to something biblical. And I think they were kind of proud of me for that. And maybe they wanted to use me as an example to their children and say, look at this is a young man. He's not even your religion. And he's thinking at a young age, thinking about spiritual things. And I think that's why they gave me first prize. Well, it seems like they were probably trying to reward me for that kind of behavior, and trying to instill that in their children in school. So, but I had a lot of experiences as a Jehovah's Witness in school that weren't good. I was very shy. They didn't welcome me everywhere I went. And whereas that particular school seemed to understand my religious background and what I was doing, there were other places where they didn't understand it at all, and they were upset with me, and they thought I was ridiculous, a cult or something, and why didn't I salute the flag? And I was even beaten up for it. But I was raised in that environment, in that belief system. So I thought that everything going on around me was some satanic plot. But you might think, well, that's because you were Jehovah's Witness, of course. But the odd thing about that is that Jehovah's Witnesses themselves, while they do feel that way in most things, like with sports, they don't do a lot of sports. They don't go to, college much. They try to pioneer and do all these weird things instead of living in the world and being worldly. But as a young man, I really believed. I was taught and it was instilled into me. I had my Bible and I thought it was all in there. I didn't know anything about Yahweh at the time or stuff like that. I didn't worry about the interpretations that I'm talking about now. I mean, I was just enmeshed into this simple idea that the Lord, we called him Jehovah, was trying to warn the wicked. And I looked around the world and they appeared to be wicked, right? They're all on drugs and doing crazy things and murdering and stealing. That's what the impression that we were getting, and that's what the Watchtower said. The whole world was wicked. And us little Jehovah's Witnesses, we were following Jehovah. We were trying to be faithful, like Daniel in the lion's den. And I felt like that. But then when I would look around at my fellow cult members, and as I was growing up, I started realizing these people weren't following the Lord. They were following a religion. And they were being sort of brainwashed. And because I could see that if they really followed the Lord, they'd love people. If they really believed that the world was of the devil, they wouldn't be involved in sending their children to school where they're teaching satanic propaganda. I figured that out when I was a little kid. I was like, why are we going to school to learn about this world and the science of this world and the theories and the holidays and the immorality and the Halloween and all the stuff that I saw there? And they were teaching evolution, Darwinism, Freudism, all the crazy isms. I knew, just because I read the Bible and I knew that what the Bible taught was that the Lord made us and he loved us and he was bringing his kingdom. And I saw the immorality with the children, and even in 4th grade, And I thought, why would my religion say to my parents, send him to school and have him learn this propaganda? And why didn't we live alone, away from society, out of the world, in communities like the early church? I wondered about that. And one of the things that I noticed a lot was that all of the Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of them, would go to the doctor all the time. They were always sick. If they got really sick, they went to the doctor and the doctor said, you got cancer. They'd go through all the chemotherapy. They'd take all the medical, pharmaceutical drugs. We were never told in the Watchtower that pharmaceutical drugs was sorcery, as I believe now. We were never told that society was out really satanic and out. I mean, we were basically taught that the government was there for our benefit, that police were on the street to protect us. I was like, wait a minute, that's not really what I believe. But they never really articulated it. They never went into it, but they just left it like most of the Jehovah's Witnesses really appreciated cops on the streets, I guess, and appreciated hospitals where they could go and get medications and pharmaceutical drugs. Of course, it was different when I was a kid. It was some years ago, but there was still a lot of this going on, mental health issues. Jehovah's Witnesses never taught us to give charity, to be hospitable to the homeless or anything like this. We never thought about giving clothes and food or money to the homeless. We never brought the orphans in. We never helped the widows. We didn't do any of that. I remember there were Jehovah's Witnesses that were hungry, or one of the families in the Kingdom Hall, maybe the man lost his job and they didn't have the rent. And they were on their own. There was no program. If they went to the elders and said, man, I lost my job, can't feed my family, we're really in need, I think one of the families would get a bag of groceries and take it to them. But they only did that for the members of their own church. And it was not a program. They had no programs for it. It was just individuals saw that you needed something. Maybe one of the friends, we used to call them, the brothers and the sisters in the hall would give you a bag of groceries. That's about it. And they would counsel you to go get welfare. Go sign up for food stamps. I mean, the government's providing. Go for that. We're not going to help you. You can go sign up for food stamps. But there is one thing. If you were living in a big city or an area where, even small areas, Jehovah's Witnesses had individuals that had money and had businesses, and they would usually just give you a job. So if you were a Jehovah's Witnesses, you're never really out of a job. They'd always give you a job. So it wasn't as like anybody was hungry. But if you were sick, they didn't say, oh, well, we know about herbs and we know how you should live right. You should eat right or whatever. They never talked about that. Adventists are really health conscious. Jehovah's Witnesses never talked about that. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are very sick. We're in the hospital getting pharmaceutical drugs. They never said anything. And that bothered me. I knew they didn't know the truth. They were in some kind of mental, prison themselves because they were in a delusion. And when they saw homeless people and they said, oh, they're the wicked, I knew in my heart that these poor homeless people weren't the wicked. I knew in my heart that these people in jail and these people that were in prison, I felt, there's some injustice going on. They're no different than we are. I saw in the scriptures where Jesus said to have compassion and to forgive and to, not condemn the wine bibbers and the peasants that were, on their last leg or depressed or homeless or whatever. I saw that basic thing coming from Jesus, and I didn't see it coming from Jehovah's Witnesses. So growing up now, looking back, I realized that the world is more crazy in a bigger fix, in a bigger delusion, in a mass hysteria, far more than anyone realizes. People in the world were, in many cases, more aware of the devil running the world than the Jehovah's Witnesses were, even though the Jehovah's Witnesses are under the delusion that they are the ones teaching this, that this is Satan's world, but they don't know anything about Adventists and Mormons and other groups. All these other groups believe the same thing. This is the devil's world, but every one of them will say that and yet follow right in line, lockstep with the doctor's prescriptions. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses had kingdom halls giving people the thingy during this time. They were demanding that everybody at their headquarters get the thingy and telling the elders to do it and telling the elders not to write it down. They didn't want to have it in writing, but to encourage the congregation to do it. And they were all not going to the kingdom hall. They were all doing it by way of some video chat. They were scared of the thing. They were insane. And I saw no difference between them, like running around with masks on in some kind of hysteria. And it never ended. There's always some kind of delusion or mass hysteria, and Jehovah's Witnesses were certainly not immune to it. And I began to see that, in fact, there were things that Adventists did that I thought was better than Jehovah's Witnesses. There were things that the Mormons did that was better than Jehovah's Witnesses. As I grew up, I found this out. Jehovah's Witnesses talk about the love they have among themselves. And the truth is they only love themselves. And once you become a member, then you're kind of responsible for a lot of things that you didn't know you were going to be responsible for. And they were very critical of you, and they could disfellowship you, and you're being controlled. And that didn't feel like love. And then I went and I saw the Mormons and even went to their church and studied with them, and they were very loving, just like the Witnesses. But again, it's just to draw you in, get you under their oath. I studied with Seventh-day Adventists and found that they were very sweet and kind, and it almost seemed like they had the love of Christ until you began to realize that they're over these hospitals. They got all these doctors who are doing brain surgery and all these crazy sorcery tactics if they really believed in healing and Lord, why were they not praying for the sick instead of, cutting and everything? They had no idea that the original physicians had the Hippocratic oath where they wouldn't use surgery or drugs, that was sorcery. They lost all, touch with the reality of ancient days where these tactics from Satan, sorcery, and these kinds of lies and prisons and war had infiltrated the world to the point where we were no longer aware that it was all around us. Lutherans, Baptists didn't know that they were now in the devil's world. And they would always complain, oh, I don't like the pastor, or the Catholic Church did this to me, or they wouldn't give me last rites because I didn't live in their district, or, people are always angry at their church for something that they did, and then they were stumbled, and then they wouldn't believe in Jesus no more. And I knew that was ridiculous. But as I got older and had been away from Jehovah's Witnesses longer and longer, and the Lord, and did a lot of praying, the Lord revealed a lot to me. And I began to see the world and go into the world and work with people in the world and listen to them. I began to realize that some of the people that were homeless and sick and dying were just as desirous of finding the Lord as Jehovah's Witnesses ever were. Yeah, they didn't have a brotherhood, and I could see why they didn't. They all had their stories of whatever religion they came out of and the hypocrisy that they got rid of, that they couldn't stand. And their families left them and threw them on the street, and nobody cared. And they realized the hypocrisy of religion, that nobody cared. In fact, I'll give you proof, because there might be some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses out there, or it wouldn't matter, ex-Witnesses, ex-Adventists, Baptist, you're all exes of something. But I'll give you proof that it's all a hoax. All this supposed love and Christian brotherhood, and that we're all under a delusion. Now imagine if you were Peter and there were 5,000 Christians in the area, and they saw people raised from the dead, and they knew that this was the truth. They were following Jesus and had all things common. And one day, Peter has an argument with James or something, and he takes off down the road on his own. Well, he perhaps broke his leg, couldn't work, or lost his job, and didn't have any food. And then they told him, why don't you go to Caesar and ask for help from Caesar? We ain't going to help you. We're busy. I'm a tent maker, and Bob, he's a carpenter, and Fred, he herds sheep. He ain't got no time for you. Wait a minute, what are you herding sheep? I thought we were at the business of saying, let's go out and tell the world the good news. We love each other. Let's come into this community. We're out of the world. So you see, Christianity was a hoax. We've been telling everybody that we followed Jesus and we did what Jesus told us to do. And that we lived in a kingdom where we followed the principles of love, and we were charitable. We cared about each other. We had all things common. And all of a sudden now, we're stuck in the world, in our little club, our little tea party, patting each other on the back, saying, oh, we're all great people here, man. Hey, there's a new war on. Let's go murder those kooks over there. How about those Iraqis? You got to get rid of them Muslims. And, let them go eat cake, right? We ain't going to feed these darn homeless. They're always on the street begging and everything. Come on, just think about the way Christians feel. Now, let's go to Jehovah's Witnesses. They're claiming to be the kingdom of the Lord on earth, the mouthpiece of deity, the only true organization that is doing the will of the Lord, and their work is to tell people the good news, which is what? Oh, it's coming. One day we'll have a great big paradise, but hey, we're not going to act like we're in paradise now, for the Lord's sake. We ain't going to help anybody now. We're not going to love or heal the sick. We're not going to... You're telling people the good news, the gospel, the good news of Christ's kingdom. One day will come, and in the meantime, all we're doing is living in the world and living like the devil tells us, because it ain't the kingdom of the Lord yet. Because if it was the kingdom of the Lord now, if we're entering into the kingdom, if the kingdom was at hand, if we were having all things common like the early Christians, why can't we do that? They did it. Who came along and said, oh yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to give charity. Paul was gathering up all the things that they had in surplus to take it to the poor. Oh, we're not going to do that no more. We're just going to go out and knock on their door and say, hey, there's some good news. Oh, you're hungry and you're sick and you're tired? Well, we can't do nothing for you there. But the good news is that one day, after you die, long time from now, there's going to be some wonderful, good things going to happen right in the future, but not today. And that's all we got to say now. We got to go. Bye. Now, we got an organization that says we love one another in the organization. We take care of one another. But listen, if you grow a beard or do anything out of policy, of course, we don't believe in politics. But if you're against our politics, doesn't have to be in the Bible. You just don't, believe what we believe anymore because you were taught from the time you're little, you get to be 18 and you're like, I got a question. What about all the people in the world that, aren't Jehovah's Witnesses? They're going to die in Armageddon. Hey, don't be thinking like that there, buddy. Why shouldn't we give charity? I don't understand. Hey, don't be thinking independent thoughts. For that, you're gone. You're done. Okay, well, how then can any Jehovah's Witness believe that they have the truth? What is it that you have that is the truth? Do you love people? Oh, yes, we go out there and hand them watchtowers every day. Well, so when they become a member of your community, do you feed and clothe them? Does no one have too little and no one too much? Oh, no, we've got executives in our organization, right, ahead of the AT&T or some darn thing, right? Managers and CEOs and people that own a chain of banks or a chain of restaurants. We're trying to make money. That's our contribution. What? Well, we give these little peasants jobs, right? But, okay, so how could a young man grow up in this organization, get to be 18 years old, and because of an infraction that no one even knows about, not my family knows what happened, my brothers, no one ever knew other than I told my mother, because mom was no longer a Jehovah's Witness, and we've talked about all these things, and she always took me in, and understood and comforted me, but I haven't heard from any of my family. Now, they may say, well, it's your fault, Dave, because you didn't do this or that, or you didn't call, or we didn't know where you were. All right. So, here's my problem. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and you treat people like that, you don't even speak to them ever again, you don't even want to know if they're okay, then how is it that you believe that that is what Jesus would have done? Do you think, we started off by saying Peter lost his job or something. Do you think that the organization would have let Peter wander off with a half-torn robe, his turban missing, no food in his pouch, just wandering the hills? Gone! Get out of here, Peter! We don't like you no more. Why? Well, you're growing a beard there, buddy. Or you ain't following the rules that we made. Wait a minute. Jesus made the rules. He didn't say that. I disagree with what you're teaching there. I think Jesus said this. Maybe Jesus said that. Well, we disagree with that, so you're out of our organization. Hit the road, Peter. Don't come back. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Well, I don't think so. And so what we have here is that we have to come to the conclusion that Jehovah's Witnesses are not just wrong, but they're a hoax. And not only that, they're disgusting and they're part of Satan's world, because that's what Satan would do, right? He wouldn't go out and try to bring the homeless and the peasants and all the poor people and the blind and the crippled and heal them. And no, Jehovah's Witnesses don't do no healing. Oh, buddy, no. Can you imagine Peter saying, well, listen, that gift of the Holy Ghost that I had where I was healing people, that's done away now, buddy. Jesus is gone. That's done away. So I recommend you go into town, find yourself a good old sorcerer, and do everything that sorcerer tells you, right? Take his little potion, call me in the morning. I guarantee they didn't do that. They had something within themselves. They didn't need a rule. They didn't need a book. They didn't need the Torah to tell them that they got to bandage the Samaritan who's laying on the ground wounded. Oh, but they're not of our religion, the Samaritans. Don't you remember the teachings of Jesus that we have to be a good neighbor? Love your neighbor? Well, who's your neighbor? Well, that Samaritan. They're not even of your religion. They don't believe like you, man. But they're suffering in the road. They need a bandage. That man bandaged the Samaritan's wound and took him to a motel and paid for him to stay there until he got well. And that's what Jesus taught us to do. So we can clearly see that Jehovah's Witnesses are not only wrong, but they're not teaching the teachings of Jesus, teaching the opposite of Jesus. They're hypocrites, and what they're doing is wrong, disgusting, filthy. And Jesus will say, I never knew you when he returns. But what about the rest of the world? Well, we're all saying, we're Christians or whatever, or we're good people. Yeah, we pay our taxes. When our neighbor makes too much noise, we go out on the front porch and scream at him. We call the police, right? You bastards. We get them good, man. Every time we hear something going on over there we don't like, we just call the police, right? We love that martial law. We cooperate with that, man. And we complain a lot about everybody. You see homeless people running around. We're always saying, filthy homeless. And we drive by and shake our fist at them. And you know, guy in the passenger seat and I, we're just talking about how we hate the homeless and we hate the people and everybody's so evil and we're so wonderful and they're so bad. And we go home to our little plush living in a trailer park with our feet propped up, drinking beer. More pizza, please. We got another. Well, anyway, I don't need to carry on. The point is that y'all disgusting. You're not Christians. Stop saying you are. Stop it. Stop saying you're even a human being, because even animals take care of their family. You don't do that. But you're doing all these terrible things. Why? What could be the problem here? Your brain is so messed up. Your mind is so twisted. Your heart is so dark that you would somehow condone living in a world where we just throw people in prison, torture them night and day with all these laws and requirements, and they're homeless and they can't live, and we don't allow them to have a warm bed or food or anything because what? Because they won't work? Well, they don't have a career. They could work at McDonald's. Well, you can't work at McDonald's unless you take a shower every day, and you probably have to be off drugs, right? But they're not off drugs. They're addicted to drugs. And who put them on drugs? Well, the government put the slum right there, has drugs going into the community on purpose. It's an experiment to torture them. And then you're being tested when you drive by and you go, look at those poor bums over there, those inner city idiots. Oh, they're disgusting. They're laying around reading in the ground. Homeless little idiots. Why, look at me. I've got a wonderful job. I'm respectable. I even go to church every day. Well, that's just a knock against you, because if you're going to church and believing the Bible and then you don't do anything and you say, Lord, Lord, but you do nothing he says to do. You pray in public with long prayers and long French garments and your tie and your black suit and your proper clothing, and you throw what? A penny at the beggar, and that's good enough? You're not hospitable. you create some mindless government with prisons to put them in. Oh, that'll be great. They'll be fine. They're living in a prison. They've got 3 square meals a day, Dave. We'll just leave them there. They deserve it. They're filthy people, right? You're all hypocrites. And the Lord has sent prophets, and the Lord has tried to teach you. You've had the Bible all this time, but you listen to the propaganda on television. Leave It to Beaver, right? I'm sure Leave It to Beaver was some good old clean-cut people, but when you watch it, do you really see the love of Christ there? The guy with the pipe is sitting there in his lazy boy, and he's some executive, he's resting from his laborious day at the office, and here comes his wife. She's got an apron. She's in the kitchen, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just a measly little woman, doing my little woman work," right? And here comes the kid in from school, and the wise father gives him some advice, but there's never any talk on this show of all the homeless people in Africa starving, or any idea that this may not be the best world structure mindset. It's more like, I'm in my little lazy boy with my pipe. I'm not thinking about the homeless. I don't care, but keep up appearances. Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore, they didn't even sleep in the same bed. They were married, right? That's all we're worried about, is all these supposed morals, right? Hell, I'm so far above you that I wouldn't even have sex with my own wife. Oh, I'm an executive at a prestigious newspaper. I write books. I'm in theater, or this is what we think is the way you need to be. Get a career and be important, right? Get a degree. Don't be one of those poor, worthless, homeless people. Oh, that's what we all believe. And I guarantee we're hypocrites, and we're going to perish because the judgment is coming. Oh, and by the way, I started off this little diatribe because I wanted to point this out. So here I am, lived most of my life now, completely without family, relatives, or friends. I'm living in the woods. I'm completely by myself, and I have no family. And I didn't even have the skills to talk to people. I was completely so backwards, I didn't even know how to communicate. I've been homeless. I've lived in my car. I had a child that I had to take care of, and the only job I knew how to do, or I could get because of my training in life and the trauma that I went through, was that I could cook or be a janitor or something. And it paid like $5 an hour. Well, I mean, at some point in my life, it was like $4 an hour. Then I moved up to $5 an hour. I don't think I ever made it above like $6 or $7 an hour. And when you have to pay a babysitter full time to watch your kid while you're in school, and house payments and all these things, and I wasn't qualifying for welfare because I had a job. I was a cook. I was a janitor, or whatever I was doing. Most of my life, I was a cook. But I want to tell you something. In all the years that I tried to take care of my daughter and raise her the best I couldn't take her to a church because I didn't believe in these churches. So she didn't have any relatives. Nobody called my daughter. Not once. Nobody ever called her and said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? We're your family. How's your dad? Anything we can do? We want to come and visit. We're worried about you." Nobody. Now, I'm not blaming any of them, because any and every one of them have their own circumstances in life. I'm not blaming my family. I'm blaming the institutions. How could this institution, Jehovah's Witnesses, be good if this is the result? Unless, of course, I am son of Satan, as they claim. Oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm the bad guy, right? So they had no obligation to even speak to me for all those years, of course. Well, that doesn't say anything for them, nor does it say anything for anyone else. Because I find Jehovah's Witnesses were probably one of the most insane organizations in the world, but The other organization that you could compare them to would be the government or the United States or the society or the culture that we live in, and it's worse. We've got prisons, we've got wars going on, we've got Social Security taking people's children and putting their parents on drugs. It's sorcery, it's evil. I don't even know how to explain this to you if you don't already understand that people are in prison because they were depressed and addicted to a drug, or because, I mean, we're all the evil people in the world. The homeless peasants? No, it's you, the lazy Republican, the hypocritical Democrat. Because you've got this word Democrat by your name, you must be a good person, right? Why, you vote. What are you voting for? I see nothing changing, or maybe I do. It's getting worse. You like these prisons, don't you? You want more of them, more law and order. We got to have more war, don't we? Well, the Chinese, Dave, well, guess who the Chinese are run by? The same financial institution that runs us. And guess who empowered them? You. Because when the Boston Tea Party happened, you just gave in. And in, what was it, about 1875, you decided to sign your name at the bottom line on your birth certificate, a bond agreement, an indentured servant. You said, let's do it. You're ignorant hypocrites. And you know better. You're without an excuse. You had plenty of time to say, I'm going to go protest in the street. Of course, you could have just went out and fed people and clothed people and loved people, but you didn't do that either. You didn't protest the prisons. You didn't protest all the wars. Once in a while, they had mock protests with children out in the streets doing LSD. LSD was created and administered to you by the government. Then you were taken to jail because you did it. It was a CIA, MK Ultra mind control experiment on you idiots. They told you what to protest and when to stop protesting. You never changed anything. It might have been Tiananmen Square in China, but over here in America, it was the town square. And most of you have no clue, but underneath that courthouse in the town square is a dungeon where your fellow brothers and sisters are wasting away down there in injustice. It's worse than the gulag. Ever will be. And I'm not proud of any of you. And you know what? In my travels, I found that there were people that weren't religious at all, that would give you the shirt off their back, that would be patient and kind and loving. And here is where it stopped, though. It seemed like across all borders and throughout all the cults and the religions, you might as well just say religions, just as a bad of a word as cult. Let's call them religions. That's a bad word, right? Because the Bible doesn't say you must be religious. Not at least not a word in Greek that has any connotation of the word in English that means religion. That would be a bad thing. Customs and your own personal views and, you know, some rite of initiation into some church that doesn't know the Lord. That's what religion is, almost like government. I remember Jehovah's Witnesses when they first started out, they were against the governments. That's why they didn't vote, didn't get involved in politics, didn't go to war. And I thought, well, that's all good. But they started getting to the point where they called themselves a religion. Originally, with Charles Taze Russell, when they first started, they were against religion. They thought that what the church was, and appropriately so, that it was people gathering to the true divine plan, where we loved one another in a community of people that loved each other, and we were just waiting for the kingdom of Christ. We weren't going to vote for this world. We didn't believe in any government, only the kingdom of our Lord. We didn't believe in any religion, because religion was just a bunch of doctrines put down by men. We just went by the Bible, we claimed, right? But that was easy enough in the beginning until they legally signed up at the UN to be a member of the UN and had to have a charter for that and everything, and secretly were claiming on paper to get tax breaks that they were a religion or something, and the hypocrisy that was going on. And then they had to realize, well, wait a minute, if we're not a religion and we're not the ones who's telling people what to do, but they only have to go by the Bible, then why do we have little rules in our congregations? So we don't believe in politics. Why are we involved in policy issues? Like how you can wear your beard or your sideburns, or what clothes you should wear, whether women should wear dresses or and not pants, or, these issues began to really cloud or obscure the integral thinking that they originally had, that we were supposed to get out of the world. We were told, get out of the world. This was Satan's world. We don't want no part of it. If it's Satan's world, certainly the people going to war and murdering one another, we should stay away from them. Well, how do you get out of the world? Well, they just kept sending their kids to school, sending their kids to the hospitals, believing the propaganda about going to the moon, and, everybody gets a thingy, and yet, but we're no part of the world. Well, you're all working in society, making sure you got your token, right? And if you don't have your token, you don't get to eat or breathe, or you're looked down upon. You got to work, work, work. It was like we're all under the law of Moses again, but not really, right? Like secretly we knew the truth, but we just all found that our organization was turning into another religion. Minus a couple of little things like, we don't vote. Okay, so what? We're still enmeshed into the propaganda of the world. And I looked around and I thought, man, it's deep that people have no clue, not just Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, but the average soul thinks in their mind the greatest delusion that could ever be. I honestly don't know how to share this thought in my mind with you here. But as I just said that, I thought of something. Yesterday, I was scrolling on YouTube for a minute, and I think the other day I watched a video where some cop was doing some terrible thing to one of the citizens of this wonderful country. And every time I see that, I get so upset inside, and I always say a prayer. I said, Lord, please may thy kingdom come soon. I'm so angry and sick of the way that the police are treating people on the street. They just pull them over, illegally tell them that they have to do this or they have to do that. And if they don't cooperate, they slam them against the wall. Sometimes this one person, they slammed him down and caused them to have spinal injuries, and they never could walk again. They ended up dying, and nobody even investigated it and stuff. So I was watching one of these, and it was about a cop who was maybe the chief of police or something. He was a high up ranking police officer. He was going in a 55 going 75. All right, not too bad, right? But he was breaking the law. But he was a police officer. And I don't think the car looked like a police car, though. It was a police car, I think, but it was undercover. But this police officer pulled this police officer over and said he was speeding, and he could tell that he was slurring. He said, have you had anything to drink? And the police officer said, no. Then he said, well, I have had a couple. I think he thought that, hey, we're fellow police officers. You'll give me a warning and you'll let me go. Maybe he would have just for the speeding, but he was visibly slurring his speech. So he had him get out of the car, and, then ensued this discussion about, do you have a gun? He said, yeah, I'm a police officer. I've got guns. And the whole thing was crazy. Well, the guy was soused. He couldn't even walk a straight line. And so as they began to realize that he wasn't going home, that he was going to be arrested, which I think normally they would have just covered it over and let him go. But in this case, they were going to arrest the guy. And this big old police officer that gave you the impression he was like police chief or something. He was a big old gnarly guy that you could imagine be the guy that would pull you over and give you all these tickets and railroad you into prison, right? Here he was facing the same judgments and consequences that an average citizen faces from him every day. Average citizens are pulled over every day and they don't think it's fair. It's, they had one extra beer and like, you know, in the average citizen's mind, American citizen's mind, we all have this thing going on, this quarrel, this fight, well, we can't let people drive on the roads drunk because they might kill somebody. So we've got to arrest them, Dave. We've got to take away their driver's license. We've got to harass them and put them in chains and take them to a prison and stick them in there. And see, here's the thing. It's one thing to say that it should be illegal to drive drunk because you're harming others. There's also the issue, though, that natural human beings imbibe beer and wine. And most people do it every day. And so a lot of people are driving down the road having had a beer or a glass of wine. There's just a lot of hypocrisy. Now, human beings have to go to work. They have to go places. They're not impaired just because they had 3 or 4 beers. They're just a little happier. Maybe they're a little bit less capable of driving a car. But we can't even prove necessarily that they are causing more accidents when they're a little drunk. So you say, yeah, but it's risking people's lives, so therefore there's got to be a harsh punishment. But again, if that is true, that when you risk people's lives, you need to be punished, then why are we allowing anyone to drive anywhere? You put your child in your car, even if they're strapped in with a seatbelt, and you drive down the road 65 miles an hour on a 6-lane freeway, and on both sides of your car, within 2 or 3 inches, is another car speeding at 65 miles an hour or 75 miles an hour. One mistake and you're all dead. And this happens every diggity dang dong day. We know that people are in accidents every day. Thousands and thousands of people, and people lose their lives and children die. And not what usually is it because somebody was drunk. It could be because there was a car malfunction, or you were eating your hamburger while you were driving or texting. Oh, we got laws against that too. The problem is that human beings are stuck in a situation where society makes it dangerous to live. And because we want to imagine that we're trying to be safe and being wise and responsible, we make laws to govern everybody. It's kind of like saying we've got to have welfare because there are people that are hungry. So you see a problem, you say we've got to fix it, we're humans. So you mandate that everybody has to pay taxes, and we've got to come to your door and arrest you if you don't give us the tax money. You'll go to prison, right? We demand your money. Why? Because public health. We need that money so that we can fix the roads and make signs in prisons where we can imprison the bad people. And we've got to pay for the court system. And so we need the tax money to build the prisons to keep everybody safe. And we need to make food stamps available for people that are hungry, or else they'll die. They'll be hungry. Well, now a family has kids that are adults and they don't have a job and they don't have anything to eat. And they say, Mom, I'm hungry. I don't have any food. And they're like, well, go get welfare. Why would we help you when you can go get welfare? I remember Jehovah's Witnesses telling people that. They wouldn't help them because there's welfare. So no longer are we responsible for feeding our own families and our own selves, but now you are forced to feed others by your tax dollar. And now you're in servitude so that you can feed people that some of them don't even want to work now, because welfare is something that, well, if you don't have enough money, they just give you welfare. That's just an unjust system. So giving people welfare takes the responsibility of us humans off of ourselves. We no longer have to feed our own families and love our community. All we have to do is mind our business, go in our house and watch and scroll on our phone, and make sure we give the government most of our wages, and they'll take care of everything. Now, who is the government? And what are they there for? To help people, but it makes everything worse. Now everybody's homeless. Now we know none of us have responsibilities. Now we're all paying too much in taxes. We're building this Lego house that's all about to fall down. No, it isn't right to be impaired and drive a vehicle. You might hurt somebody. I get that. But what about the poor guy that is watching commercials every diggity dang dong day with people's drinking Coors Light on television and watching a game? How many people do you think in these small towns that are driving their children to Little League haven't had a glass of wine or something? Everybody's kind of getting away with it. They're hypocrites. But then when it's publicized that somebody was driving drunk and we want to throw the book at them. So we're all a bunch of hypocrites. And what's the problem? The problem is society itself. We don't want to let go of our luxuries. We're willing to sacrifice our freedoms and our happiness, our children, our families, our way of life, so that we can have our unhealthy food, our pizza, our beer, our drugs. Then we got the government giving us drugs. A lot of people are driving down the road impaired on pharmaceutical drugs too. Think about the hypocrisy. But the whole issue is there's a whole lot of dangerous things in this world, and government decides which of those dangers are the most crucial, and they make laws, and then this imprisons everybody. The truth is, all of society is an insanity. We shouldn't be living in this structure. This is the devil's world. We need to stop trying to progress because we want luxuries, because we want... The truth is, the luxuries aren't giving us happiness. If we lived in nature, in communities where we ate fruit and nuts that grew on the vine, and we all had our own vine and fig tree, and we all had communities and took care of our own children, and nobody else was responsible for us. And if we died, we died because we didn't have enough food. Well, maybe the neighbor would help us out until we could... look, if we're able-bodied, we'd be able to work, plant some things, or go out in the field and pick some nuts and berries. We'd survive. Our parents would have taught us how to work the farm and get the dogs to run the sheep, or we would have known all this stuff. The natural way of living would have been perfect. We'd have big family get-togethers. We'd be happy. But we're trying to build the system, Satan's system, and it requires a lot of hypocrisy. And bottom line is that here's a normal citizen going down the road. Oh, they were pulled over. Oh, they're going to go to prison, lose their driver's license. They'll lose their job. Now they're probably going to be before a judge who will say, look, if you claim you're mentally ill, you can go free, but then we're going to monitor your life for the rest of your days. If you ever do this or get that alcohol in your system again, then you'll now be breaking your parole. Now you're a felon. The world is so evil and wicked, it's disgusting. But now, I have the feeling that some of you still think that we're living in the best system, that the cops are doing the best they can. Well, that cop found out just how devastating it was. He was about to lose his career, that he was about to lose his happiness that year, that he might lose his family. He found out what it felt like to be in handcuffs, although I doubt whether they put him on as tight as they do some of these poor people on the street. And I doubt whether they beat him up like they do the poor peasants. But he did experience what it's like to be harassed and thrown into a cop car and taken to a dark, dingy cell in this dungeon, wait in chains for some guy in a black robe to sentence you in some way. You're not a bad person. You're not evil. Every human soul, every child of the Lord, we're all equal. We all need help. We all need love. We didn't ask to be in this crazy, ignorant world of Satan. So I know a lot of you, some of you will be like, I understand what you're saying, Dave. Some of you will be like, well, we need the government, Dave. Okay, let me ask you this. I want you to think back to the days of Rome. Now, we didn't live there, we don't know, but let's imagine for a moment. You're walking down the streets in Rome. Well, what would that have been like? I don't know. I'm assuming there was some walls around the major city. Just like we had prisons, they had dungeons. There were soldiers. They didn't have police. Okay, there were soldiers that were maybe patrolling certain areas, which, now that you think about it, you realize that our police are soldiers. And we have martial law. Okay, you didn't know that? Well, now you do. So you got these soldiers on the street then, too. They didn't have guns, they didn't have bulletproof vests, but they might have had armor, and they would have swords, and maybe they had, I don't think they even had guns in, but so they were I'm sure there were some patrolling, but not like today where you had a cop car on every corner trying to catch you in a small little act of, trying to just get $100 out of you because you didn't stop at that stop sign or whatever. And maybe if they get to pull you over, they can find out you got alcohol in your breath. They can take you in and ruin your life and strip you down and stick a rubber thing up your, and make you feel like you are. I mean, what a fiasco for anybody to go through. But did they do that then? Did they have the ACLU there if you got arrested? Could you make a phone call to your lawyer and get out of, if you had money, get out of the situation? I don't think so. But here's the thing. Was it in their collective psyche in those days? Did human beings believe that would it be appropriate to just sit there and hover over humans? And if some of them drank and then got on a horse or broke one of your little laws, if one of them got addicted to drugs because of depression, he lost his wife, we didn't care why, that he was on drugs. Now he's going to a mental institution, and we're going to stick pins in him and give him a body with drugs and smack him around and tie him down, and somehow he deserved all of this, right? Did they do that then? Well, they might have, but I don't think it was as prevalent. I don't think they had mental health technicians. I don't think they had people running around in white robes saying they're scientists and they have the right to quarantine the whole city. And I don't think they were saying, oh, there's a pandemic, and you know what? Now everybody's got to go in their house and down in the basement and never leave. And not only that, we're going to tax your horse now because we don't want you running around on horses all the time. We want you to stay in your houses. Were there any threats of a soldier patrolling their streets saying, oh, you're smoking some poppy seeds, you're hiring a kite, you need to come with us to prison, and you might be in there a year going through all these crazy trials and hearings and getting lost in the system. Now we have the right to take your children. You're not a good parent anymore. Or, yeah, you're just, because we found you drunk on the street, we're going to put you in jail for a year now, and you're going to lose your career. Or because, did Rome have laws that says you couldn't drink or be drunk? Maybe they had disorderly conduct laws, but what constituted disorderly conduct in those days? Probably most people were running around drunk or on some kind of herb. It was probably not something that they would arrest you for. When did they start this? It's a program to harass the public. The pharmaceutical companies are there not to make us better or healthier, but to do an experiment on the human beings. The Nazis, we heard about them, how they did the gas, chambers and the medical experiments on people, and the genetic experiments and medical experiments on people that are in concentration camps. And what are they doing in concentration? I don't even think Rome or Babylon or Egypt ever had concentration camps. I don't think they were experimenting on people with drugs and sound waves and cults, mind experiments, control, MK Ultra, mind control. I don't think they had bases underground where there were weird technologies where they were eventually going to imprison the mind of every man, woman, and child on the planet. But my point is, do you think that it's appropriate to have police? Oh, yes, Dave, we've got to have police. We've got to have prisons. We've got to have hospitals. Of course, we've got to have mental health. What would we do? The whole world would be crazy without, mental health for the people that need it. But it's make a problem and then a solution. The only problem is the solution doesn't solve anything. And the problem they made, if we wouldn't make inner city slums, if we didn't create an environment where we put drugs into the inner city so that they could go crazy and then have guns going in there, we're under the delusion that they want to stop allowing us to have guns. Let me share with you a news bulletin. They want us to have guns in the inner cities especially. They want gang violence. They want riots. They want destruction. They want to have an excuse to hit you and beat you and club you to death. They have guns. They're not worried about you. They want to have shootouts. They want some cops to die. They want all this terror and violence and sickness and illness. Number one, so that they can make money at the hospital off of your pain. They can do experiments on you. Religion is to do experiments. They run the religions to do mental experiments on people and control. They run the gun laundering so that they can have violence and experiment on how they can have a system where you go through an unjust and unfair system where it's torture and these people end up literally in prison the rest of their life. They're not bad people. I tell you, we're not bad people. You say, oh, well, there's only a couple million people in jail, Dave. Well, I don't know, but I think it's a revolving door. There's 2 million this week, and next week it's a different 2 million. Well, it's probably every year. I mean, they keep them in there a while. At any one time, there's 2 million people in jail. But overall, I bet you most people have had to experience that rubber glove up their butt. I bet you, well, not the pious religious people that are involved with Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the little, if you're a Mason and you know the correct hand sign or if you let them know who you are, right, your pedigree, then they'll just tell you you're off the hook. This is why people join these cults. This is why people are in the occult. It's a brotherhood to keep them safe. Now, a lot of them don't know that at the top, the reason for this brotherhood is them being used as managers. They're under oath. They can trust them. But it's all a big scam to experiment on the public. Now, why would they want to do that? Why would they want to experiment on the public? Why were the Nazis doing what they were doing? And why are they still doing it? If you understand what I'm saying. Because they're trying to find something. They're trying to find some breakthrough in something. Now, they know, you don't know it, that they know that they're not going to get to the moon because they know there is no moon to get to. It's not, it's not a place to go. It's not a planet, or there's not any resources there. There's no air to breathe there. We're not going to move to Mars and start a colony. That's not what they're doing. This is the world we live in. They know this little story that we're just one of many worlds floating around in space, and we got to travel, space travel, and interplanetary communication. They know that's just a sci-fi movie. That's not real. This is our world. This is it. So they're not trying to go anywhere. What they're trying to do is get power, machines that can control us. Mental control, physical control. And The only way to do that is deteriorate our mental capacity to understand, to make you believe that you're in a world that's as fair as it can be. And if there's any unfairness to it, it's your fault because you're a human and you're pooping on the ground, you disgusting little creature. You're a carbon-based parasite and you should feel guilty about that. Now that's what we say, but I think there's something more sinister in this. I think that Jesus is watching us all. I think we're here. I think this is a classroom, and this experiment is allowed to carry on because we're about to get our white robe and our crown if we can pass this test, whereby we can live in a place where everybody's trusted and love one another and cares about each other, and we're happy. And I think we're all equal. I think everybody on this planet is just as capable of loving and caring for one another. If we all lived in a paradise of peace and we had to take care of ourselves, we'd understand these things. We wouldn't demand that others. We wouldn't feel entitled. We'd understand. We would love life. We wouldn't be unhappy. Everything would be fine. I tell you guys that we're all absolutely almost identical. All of us. Nobody's really better or worse than anybody. But there's one thing that we have to do. We have to pass this test. We have to have integrity to pass the test. You got a lot of people out there that think that they're smarter. They might be. You have a lot of people that think they're stronger physically. They probably are. But that's because they pursued strength. They got strong. They lifted weights. That's what they pursued. You've got another group that goes to college and learns all this amazing stuff. They're a little smarter. Maybe. But that's what they pursued. You have another group over here that learned to be the best painter because that's what they thought was important. We're all equal. But there was a group of people that just had this little extra thing. And it was that they couldn't bear to live this world to its fullest and enjoy all of it because they knew about all the other people that were suffering. And so they spent a little of their time helping others. Those are the ones that are going to pass this test and get their crowns. The rest of you, you'll live there with us in the 1,000 years. You'll be so happy. We'll all love each other. Everybody that's taken out of this world finally to end this classroom will all come back in the next world. And some of you will just be living a happy life by the river, building your cabin and having a family. And, you'll have a life of maybe 1,000 years. And then you'll notice that there was a few individuals that are immortal. They've attained unto eternal life. And you'll wonder, why did they get that and I didn't? Well, probably because they pursued goodness. They knew that there wasn't going to be some lack in the world of things. They weren't pursuing things or fortune or strength or fame. They just pursued helping others. And so the first shall be last and the last shall be first. You're going to learn your lesson. If you don't pursue love, you're not going to get the prize. Well, why? Is the Lord selfish? Remember what I told you. There's consequences for every action. If you go out and train every day and you're the best bodybuilder there ever was, that's your reward. But if you want eternal life and absolute peace, then you should have given everything you could toward giving others peace when you had the time. If you'd have pursued peace, you'd have the peace. But you pursued bodybuilding and you pursued money. You pursued fame. and you got your reward. The Lord doesn't play favorites. He's not going to reward some and not others. Y'all get your reward. Whatever ye seek, ye shall find. You're making the choices here. But a lot of you are in some kind of mesmerism and you've been deceived. And I'm very sorry for you. You've made it very difficult for some of these other ones. And therefore, the consequences is that it's going to be a little difficult for you. Because that's what you pursued. I'm just telling you like it is, friends. This is the facts. All the problems that we have in our society is not natural. It's caused. They caused it. Again, why are they causing it? Because they've got to control us. They've got the only choice they have, since they've already made some terrible decisions. They've hurt people. They've abused people. And they deserve some consequence. They are going to have all the power that they have over us taken away from us very soon. And the only way that they can imagine in their little mind, of course, a lot of them are just atheists and they're fools, but some of them realize what's about to happen. The demons shudder and they believe, is if they can continue to hold us hostage and make us so ignorant that we will choose in this delusion to keep doing the bad things and keep being vengeful. Because whatever we judge others, it will be judged us. If I say hate you and I want you in prison, then that means we're going to stay in prison. Because you cannot tell somebody that is full of vengeance and rage and hate that they deserve to live in peace and happiness and have well-being. You have to learn that the only way to have well-being is to give well-being. The universal law is, unless you give, you cannot receive. And so if the devil can continue to keep us in the state of vengeance and hate, then we will continue to be ruled over by this world, and it will continue to give them an opportunity to rule over us. Now, you'd say, why don't Jesus snap his fingers and stop this abuse, the cycle of abuse? Because no one can stop the natural law of the divine, which is given ye shall receive. Well, you know what? Let me change that a little bit to this. Nobody can stop this law of nature. That if I take a hammer and I find a pane of glass and I, whether in rage or as an experiment or whatever you want, I take that hammer and I smack that glass. Nobody can stop the result, which is the glass will break. That's the law, not the law of Moses or some human or arbitrary law, but it's the universal truth that if I hurt others, I am going to be hurt. The only way out of this is if we learn the truth that we don't have to hurt anyone, that we don't need to take things from them because everything's already provided in a beautiful world that the Lord has provided for us. But if we're deceived and we don't know about this paradise, it's all around us. There's nuts on the trees. There's berries that grow by themselves. The trees in this paradise produce tenfold every year, right? You plant one seed, you get 10 more. And some of them produce 30-fold and 60-fold, and some 100. And in the world, 100 times more than that in the world to come. Not because somebody's going to grant it to us, but because that's just the way it is. That's the divine, natural law that everything is producing and is abundant and good. So the only way that the devil could stop that, because that's just the way it is. That's reality, an abundance, love, goodness, kindness. This is the easy way, the natural way. It will all be just fine. The Lord made a perfect, beautiful world. There's nothing to be afraid of. Everything is wonderful. Unless, of course, you choose, you have the right to choose to be famous or proud or hurtful or mean, then you make your own choices. The Lord gives you every opportunity. He sends his prophets. He gave you a Bible. He gave you your conscience within you and the natural order of things. They've never, the elite, the evil people, they've never hurt you, but that you already agreed to it. You signed up for their religion or their war or their birth certificate. They cannot harm you. You have a choice. Actually, real food that the Lord provides in nature is tasty, wholesome. It brings happiness. The herbs give you well-being. He's given everything to you. But it requires that you make a decision, that you be strong and seek the good, that you might find the good. And if you seek the bad, well, guess what? You'll learn a lesson. You'll get the consequences, and then you'll be able to pull your hand out of the fire because of its burning effect upon your hand. You'll learn. It'll be all right. You can either do what's right now because maybe you've learned in the past from the things that you've suffered and you got wise, or you haven't got there yet. Everything's going to be all right. Time is near now. If you can hear it, because you have the ears to hear, I'm telling you now, this is the last days and we're going through the judgment now. If you want to have eternal life and survive this wicked world and live into the promised new world where the lamb shall lie down with the wolf and we will all be so happy, it'll be such a wonderful thing. We'll receive our eternal reward for those who simply want it and choose it. Jesus does not require that you like life and be happy. He offers it to you, and you have to make the choice. Anyway, I am way overdue here today. And I hope that you all understood the gist of what I was saying. I hope it was helpful. And remember, the Lord loves you no matter who you are. He doesn't hold your past sins against you. He knows that we're all in the same boat. He keeps calling, and for those who have ears and can listen, he's always there. And he'll be there for anyone if you will allow him. He's there at the door knocking. Just let him in, friends. He loves you. I'm going to go ahead and go. May the Lord bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.